My name is Dr. John Burris. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Southeastern Louisiana University. When Dr. Lopez approached me about sitting fireside with our panel today, at first I was a little nervous. I've been to a lot of workshops on AI, and then I found out who the panelists were, and I have been excited ever since. So please join me in welcoming Kristy Davis, the Global Vice President of Innovation and AI Strategic Consulting at the Channel Company. With an accomplished career spanning development, data architecture, business analysis, and leadership roles at major companies like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, EMC Corporation, and Johnson & Johnson, Kristy brings a wealth of technical expertise and innovation to the areas of AI and cybersecurity. Kristy has landed 4 U.S. patents and recently spearheaded a full-stack MSSP offering, forging an OEM partnership for automated penetration testing. A respected thought leader, she has been featured on the IoT Integrator podcast and is a licensed cybersecurity insurance professional. With her impressive background, Kristy is at the forefront of innovation in AI and cybersecurity. Please welcome Kristy Davis. Woo! Completing our panel is Don Monistere, CEO and President of General Informatics, where he has driven the company's strategic vision and growth since 2020. A well-known technology executive, Don founded and grew Vista Information Systems into a thriving regional systems integrator that was acquired after 15 years of growth and later merged with TechLinks, one of the largest IT companies during that time, where he held the role of COO and later served as president before being acquired by C-Spire in 2018. Don has a proven track record of accelerating growth, optimizing customer service, and implementing management frameworks to scale operations for hyper-growth companies. Don is a 3-time published author, and we're very proud to say his bachelor's in management is from Southeastern. Lion up. Woo. As a versatile and accomplished leader in the technology industry, Don's insights will no doubt be invaluable to our discussion today. Please welcome to the panel, Don Monistere. Thank you. So with AI, we can't really walk out of our door in the morning without hearing something about AI. I felt like this reached its high point for me several weeks ago. I'm at a restaurant at a table with my 15-year-old daughter and my 75-year-old dad, and they're talking about AI. I thought I'd slipped into the matrix. I had no idea what was going on. With all of this information, what are some common misconceptions about AI? And how can businesses navigate through these misconceptions to make informed decisions?
You know, it's funny. I can take that in its most general, form. Most people really don't know what they're talking about when they are talking about AI. There's a different definition for everyone. And I kind of liken this back to when everybody would say, hey, we're going to go to the cloud. And no one really knew what that meant. And so AI is basically a similar term. Guys, we've been using AI for years. And AI and machine learning, heck, 10 years ago, I worked with an organization where we were doing machine learning, where we were doing visual recognition, and then taking that information and then learning these various models. So the first thing that I'll say is it's a little bit easier sometimes to say what AI is not. ChatGPT is not AI. It's not the definition of AI. It uses artificial intelligence, obviously. But the real idea and kind of the simplest terms that I could put this in would be, AI would be a machine that can provide solutions, adapt to inputs, and then make a decision. And dare I say, even reason. I don't like to use that term because it's very human. But that's when I think about AI, I try to break it down into something as simple as it's just something that is a machine that provides solutions for us and takes the data set that it has and is able to make decisions and generate information because of that data set.
And I'd like to add to that, so that it's good because I think it's important to know, I think AI has been around since the 50s or before, right? Yeah. But I think this evolution of generative AI sort of catapulted, and I always love to say that, disruptive innovations always have their tangible moment. And the same happened to the internet, right? Back when the internet kicked off, and I'm old, so I remember this, and I had it in my house. So we had PCs that became affordable that we could put in our house that got married up with AOL, where you could do dial-up for cheap, right? $25. And that really was the genesis of a whole new disruptive innovation cycle. And we've been living with the compounding effects of the internet since then. Generative AI had its tangible moment, or AI had its tangible moment, I would say, with ChatGPT, because for the first time, I think everybody could touch and feel and see what AI looked like. And that spurred a whole cycle of fear, right? This is going to take my job. This is going to disrupt us. We're going to have AI take over the whole world. We think about sci-fi and all of this stuff. And, as good old Americans, we have that fight feeling, right? We've got to fight against the thing that's going to be whatever it's going to be. So we always see it from that, I think, movie perspective of good versus evil. So I feel like that's one of the misconceptions. The real deal is that since it became a tangible thing, now everybody's trying to figure out what to do with this. And that fear factor of, how is this going to affect my job? How is this going to change what I do? And a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm going to retire before that ever happens, so it doesn't matter. But the misconception is that it's going to do all of this stuff in one fell swoop. And we have a tendency to resist that which we fear, right? Instead of embracing it. And the real opportunities, I think, for business and others in terms of operational effectiveness and other things are here at our doorstep. And I think we're going to see this advance. So the misconception is, like Don said, it somehow already knows everything and more than us.
Right.
It really doesn't know anything more than the outside world teaches it to know.
I think you're absolutely right. You can feel the excitement around AI, and the good and the bad, it seems to be overwhelming. For the people in this room, what strategies can companies employ to stay ahead of competition, to foster innovation with all of these rapid accelerations in technology?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, the realization that life without AI is likely not a good idea. So to try to avoid the technology because there are concerns is probably not the right strategy. So you do need to consider how your organization would use certain AI technologies. And one of the recommendations that I always make is whatever line of business application that you use to do what you do, whatever that is, whether it's, if you're an attorney, whether you're using Westlaw, if you're a managed services provider like we are, we use a program that handles all of our ticketing. Well, all of these software manufacturers, they are scurrying to bring artificial intelligence into those tool sets. And my recommendation to you is to get hyper engaged in what their roadmap is as it has to do with artificial intelligence. Because, I never made this recommendation in the past. Typically, we used to joke in software that when you wanted a specific feature and they said it was on the roadmap, that meant it was never going to show up, right? So, but I think it's our responsibility as business leaders to truly get engaged in what their strategies are. Because let's face it, if they're avoiding or if they're not investing in artificial intelligence, and that is the main application that you use, it's going to impact you. So that's one of the things that I would definitely recommend. The other thing that I would recommend is just begin to start creating policies around how your end users are going to utilize various tools. We always in IT deal with what we call shadow IT. If you're a business leader and you're providing your end users with 60 different applications to use to get their job done, chances are they're using 40 other that you don't know about, right? So establishing a very specific policy around which AI models that you might allow folks to use and create some governance and control around that, I think is really, really important, because there are concerns about corporate data being put in some of these cloud-based artificial intelligence applications. And it's not, I always kind of laugh because people think, oh, because it's artificial intelligence, it's going to figure out something about my data and that's going to make it be unsafe. It's really not that. These are cloud-based applications. Anytime you were to work with a cloud-based application, you're going to want to make sure that the data that you're putting out there is appropriate. And if you are putting data that's might have PII, you have to consider how you're going to secure that with multi-factor authentication and all the things that you would normally want to do from a cloud environment anyway.
And I'll look at, I think you're right on, right?
Yeah.
And that's a view coming up from a security mindset, and we talk about some of those things. From a pure business mindset, I always encourage people, and I help people really kind of map the jobs you do for your customers, right? And the job you do for your business and your organization, and encourage people to look at it through the lens of this generative artificial intelligence. And how does that shift at? Like, so at Southeastern, you guys have a great sales program, right? And one of the places that we see AI and generative AI really impacting and enabling that sales environment is through these generative AI tools and the ways that you find new clients and how you go to look at those things. So one of the things that when I work with customers and clients and even our own stuff is, what job do I do, and then how can AI or generative AI enhance what I do? One, from either an operational effectiveness perspective, or even a new innovation or a way that you go to market. So you're gonna see coming up a lot of businesses, I always talk about the low-hanging fruit, right? Customer experience is going to be one of those buckets that everybody's gonna start to drive to, right? Where you know, how many of you have interacted with a chat bot and been aggravated, right? Every one of us in this room, because they're dumb. And so, no, they are, and they're only as good as the tree and the decision tree. But when you take in generative AI and these, what they call these large language models, they understand context.
Right.
And they understand ways of being, and they can be more intelligent in the way they answer those questions and can still be a better interface than that chatbot that aggravates all of us today. And so I think you're gonna see pockets of places where generative AI is going to show up, but operational efficiency, customer experience are going to be some of that low-hanging fruit where, you know, if you remember all businesses, right? At first you didn't have a website, then you had to have a website. Then you had to make sure that you were gonna be found in that website, and then you had to figure out how you were gonna put stuff on your website to make sure that it was found. This is a similar trajectory, right? Where we're going to see things. So I would just encourage people to look through the lens of, how can this help me today be a little bit more efficient and others, because your competitive businesses are going to be doing that. And then in different categories like sales or marketing or blog posting or anything that you do today that can help, that's the best start. And then, as Don said, look for the tools that you use to have more of that capability, and don't put your head in the sand, right? It's coming anyway. So how do you sort of map what you do and start looking at it and take those tiny steps?
Yeah, and if I could give like some specifics around that, if I look at our business, you know, we're under proof of concept right now with our line of business application, which you can imagine, our help desk, we support over, you know, hundreds of thousands of devices, and people are calling help desk on a regular basis. And, you know, a specific customer may have a specific problem, and we are testing basically a chatbot that you can interact with as an end user, and it's going to see all of that data that the customer has created, right? Look to that data first and potentially provide an answer to that end user to help to solve their problem. Now, there's technology that allows the the AI to actually go in and make a change on that PC. I'm not ready for that, right? I'm not ready to unleash and give administrative privileges to something that, that I can't manage, right? So those are the types of things that from a use case perspective, we're testing today. Is it ready for the masses? I don't think it's ready yet, but the speed in which this is all moving is pretty phenomenal. And so that's just one use case that we are looking at using for ourselves. When we started embracing artificial intelligence within our organization, it all came from my HR department called me and said, hey man, 3 years ago we had 33 people, now we got 200. I can't handle all the questions that I'm getting. And so we built an LLM that was trained on everything general informatics, policies, procedures, mileage reimbursal. And we offered it up internally, and in fact, we gave her a persona. Her name is Megan Landry. She has an email address. Everybody knows her. She is Cajun French. She's born in Breaux Bridge and moved to Thibodeau. Like, we have a whole backstory, and you can have a legitimate conversation with her about it, and she'll tell you that her dad worked in the sugarcane fields. And I did not program it to say that. It came up with that on its own. And so it's been fun to watch, but the number of calls that HR were getting went down because Megan started answering questions for us.
Well, and what's interesting about that, and I love that chatbot, by the way, is it goes into what we were just talking about, right? Which is that you go from dumb chatbots to smart chatbots, but it didn't make it up on its own, right? What's interesting about what's happening is these LLMs or these chatbots can go out to the internet and explore and find all the stuff about Breaux Bridge and this backstory and incorporate that in. It's existing data. It's not making it up on the fly and deciding it's on its own. So this is part of that misconception, right? That it's just going to go rogue and do all of this crazy stuff. But what Don's talking about is he took his information, and this is the power, right, of this generative AI, is when you marry all the information that you already have with an engine that knows conversational interactions, it creates better output, and it's not a dumb little chatbot that aggravates all of us. Instead, it's helpful in all of those ways, and this is a great place to start, is that internal stuff.
And look, we monitor the questions so that we can find the questions that Megan doesn't know the answers to and continue to train the model. So it continues to get smarter. It continues to handle more questions. So it's a fantastic use case, and General Informatics has an AI as a service, and seeing how our customers are using them is really intriguing, because a very similar type situation where they have very specific data that they need to distribute amongst their teams, and it's a really efficient way to do that.
It's very exciting to hear not just the opportunities, but stories from the cutting edge for uses of AI. And Don, as a technology manager, I want to say how much I appreciate speaking to policy and governance early.
Yes.
Definitely within an organization. But Kristy, you mentioned how disruptive this technology is likely to be. And to that, I want to ask what you feel the impact of this innovation is truly going to be, and maybe address that emotion of fear. As an example, are people going to be losing their jobs at a alarmingly increased rate to AI technologies?
That's always an interesting question, because I think that jobs don't go away, they shift, right? And I don't think that anything is going away at any alarming rate in any way. But when we look at even the course of the internet, right, and you look at those disruptions that have occurred, there used to be a Blockbuster, and you used to go and buy, and get these cassettes and stand in line. Streaming happened because the internet evolved to a place where we didn't need those types of things, right? And so when you look at all of the scare from the early days of brick and mortar versus online e-commerce, and everybody tried to stop it, and it just happened anyway, and we found this really cool balance. And so jobs don't go away, they kind of shift.
Yeah.
And I feel like even when we look at the universities, right, I feel like within 2 years, we're gonna be teaching about how to build AI agents and how to build all of these integrations in, and you'll see that go up. And there are certain business models that are just going to morph, and they're gonna add this on, and we're gonna see new business models kind of develop, and you're gonna see shifts more than you're going to see, oh, everybody's gonna lose their job en masse.
And John, I assumed you would ask that question. So this morning, I Googled AI jobs in Louisiana. There's 29 open jobs in the state of Louisiana that has something to do with artificial intelligence. And like titles everywhere from, I mean, new titles, VP of AI, like that's fairly new title. Machine learning developer. Guys, it's going to create opportunity. And yeah, will there be certain jobs? If I use the HR example, my HR director was asking me to hire somebody. So while we didn't reduce headcount, maybe the growth of headcount may slow down, but productivity is always going to increase when we get these new tool sets. We didn't have massive layoffs when, Google search became incredible, and it was a lot easier to do research than it had been in the past. So look, I'm bullish on AI creating more jobs than it loses. I will say the difference now is that most of the time technology would impact blue-collar workers. AI is really a white-collar worker impact, right? So I would argue that those people who are motivated to continue to learn and grow, they're going to continue to learn and grow utilizing AI. Those people who maybe aren't that motivated may be going into a different industry. So.
And so we're going to move past the fear, and we're going to get back to the excitement.
Okay.
So one of the reasons I was so excited to sit fireside with you is that there's just such a great opportunity here for people actually taking the first step.
Yeah.
Moving past reading about it in trades and seeing it on the morning news and actually using it in their companies. How can businesses start taking advantage of AI right away?
I think a lot of what we already said, right? Like kind of play around with it. Look through this lens of, hey, here's my job. What's out there for Gen AI or AI in this job, and how do I sort of embrace this? I would also tell people to play around with some of the chat engines. There's a couple of websites like, I think it's GUI.ai, where you can go in and actually ask a question to it and pick a bunch of different of these chat bots to compare what the output's going to be. So you can start to see in real time, like, oh, I didn't realize that this could help me this way. Or take a step like when you're doing a proposal or doing something of your own and ask one of these chat engines to summarize the document. Look at it from the lens of your job and just start playing around with it. I think when you start playing around with it, it garnishes an excitement and a possibility about what's there. And then slowly but surely, you can kind of look at those opportunities from there.
Yeah, and there are multiple options. I mentioned, engaging with your line of business application software manufacturer. I think that's crucial. Obviously, I would think a number of you guys have used ChatGPT or something like it in the past for content creation and things of that nature. I mean, if you're not already doing that, you need to go do that, right? But there is a way to train models specifically with your data and do that in a secure way where you don't have to be concerned about anything just because it's artificial intelligence. It's not any less safe or more safe than would be any other cloud application that you might use. But there is a level of governance that you need to consider, that you need to have when thinking about utilizing these tool sets. And I'll use Microsoft Copilot as an example. If you're using Office 365, you've heard Copilot. I would just say a little bit of caution, just understanding and knowing how Copilot works and what it can and can't do. The thing that I would suggest is if you've recently moved over to using SharePoint as a file server, a lot of times people will just haphazardly move files over into SharePoint and think that the security or permissions that those files had moved with it. Well, it doesn't. And a lot of times, data's moving from one place to another, and we as consumers think that the permissions went with it. And Copilot becomes a really, really good search tool. So as an example, if I had a file on a file manager or on a server that was an HR directory, let's say, and I put it into a SharePoint Teams and I wasn't being very cognizant of what the permissions were on the SharePoint site, I could easily be putting HR, payroll-related data in 7 subdirectories. And yeah, it's pretty hard to find, right? But it's really easy to ask Copilot, hey, what does Don Monistere make? And he might ask, he might answer you. So I always say, definitely embrace it. Before you embrace and utilize those tool sets, definitely take a look at how you're managing permissions within your own environment. What does that look like from a file structure perspective? Just be really methodical and prudent before you start unleashing everyone using Copilot or ChatGPT or these types of tools.
And of course, we've run long because, how could we not? So I have a million more questions, but with the time that we have left, I wanted to open up for any questions we may have from the group here.
The hard ones go to Kristy. It's definitely a trust but verify, right? I use the example when I went to college 800 years ago. I had a skill set that I didn't even recognize was a skill set. I was really, really good at being disciplined in doing research. And when I couldn't find it after 8 hours of being in the library, I had no problems calling people because I figured I could figure out as much information as I could. And then this thing called Google came out, and what used to take me 2 weeks to research is now taking people 2 hours. But to your point, especially early on, when you Googled something, you may have gotten information that was really not reliable, not trustworthy. So you do have to be diligent when you're asking any search tool, whether it's Bing or Copilot or what have you. And you have to be mindful of the fact that if you're training the model, that you are, cleansing the data to make sure that the data is accurate. Because these things can only produce what the data set is teaching it. So you have to be mindful that not always the information that you're getting back is going to be 100% accurate. Those models are getting better, obviously, because they want them to get better. But it's definitely not one of those things where you ask it a question and copy and paste, because there are many times that, for instance, ChatGPT will reference a particular text and the text doesn't even exist. It just, again, they're prediction engines. They're trying to predict what they think you want to know, as opposed to thinking about something and actually using that data set.
You're right on. And to add to that, things are changing rapidly. You're talking about hallucination, and that's something that's been talked about a lot in the market. And there's something that you can set within a large language model called temperature. Mm-hmm. And it basically says, hey, be really creative and go off the chains, or 0, don't be creative.
Yeah.
And what Don was talking about, when you're looking at, say, an HR solution or all of that, basically what you're doing is you're taking your information and you're saying, go look at my information and use my information only, mm-hmm. but use the power of the LLM's reasoning to give me an answer, but only from your data. And to his point, there's a lot going on right now for fixing a lot of this hallucination, because the innovation cycle right now is so massively quick, it's almost mind-blowing. Like what I talk about today, I guarantee you tomorrow will be a new cycle of innovation on that. So to Don's point, be mindful that, hey, if I'm going out and I'm being willy-nilly, just go and check the sources, and a lot more people are adding those as well.
So out of respect for the, I'm sorry, do we have one more question?
So, as far as AI is like a career, would you consider that machine learning and our universities will be picking up programs, or is it going to be more like specific, I wouldn't say trade degree, but things that don't really necessarily need other training for really a lot of coding, right?
Yeah, I would suggest that would be the case. There is a special skill set in prompt engineering, like getting really quality information back, and a lot of that has to do with how you ask the question. Sometimes how you ask the question is more important than the actual data that you're getting back. So there's a certain skill set in that, but I think it can be a very broad, curriculum. There are already certification processes out there, but as a technology company, we're constantly looking at people who we want them to have some experience using AI models. There's certain ways that you train these models that works better than others. So yeah, I do think you'll see more and more universities creating curriculum around that.
I also think that, to your point, and to add to it, there will be an industry type focus areas as well as real technology stuff. And the biggest shift, I think, with generative AI is who is going to be able to do the work at the end of the day. And I think a lot of that's going to shift back to end users, right? Where because of natural language, and we can ask something very simply like, imagine being able to say, hey, my printer is not working, and you say it to your machine, and instead of getting a help desk person, there's something that's happening in the background to do that. There's also the ability right now, the coding and being able to code via natural language is improving massively. So when you look at industries, you might have a lot more of you that are sitting in an industry-focused job and a department and saying, hey, produce me some code that does this, and put it into, and make it work with this piece of software, and it knows how to build that code. You still need that person to validate and the right. intellect to do it. So I think you're going to see real engineering type things that build some of the frameworks to make this happen, all the way out to end users being really coders and technologists just because you can talk it into existence.
Yeah, to that point, I get asked the question all the time, hey, are we ever going to have an autonomous robot that is smarter than a human? And I think, I don't know whether we'll do it, but I think we have the technology that could eventually get us there. But to your point, like, if our computers still can't find the printer, we've got a little ways to go before we get there.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So out of respect to the schedule, we'll probably have to go ahead and stop. I want to thank Don and Kristy. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to be able to chat with truly innovative thought leaders in this area, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Sean.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.